We continue to make our way through the second table of the law with the fifth commandment, you shall not murder. Remember that the first table addresses our relationship with God. The second table addresses our relationship with people. First table, love God. Second table, love your neighbor. The fifth commandment protects God's gift of life, so this commandment deals primarily with the body. God is the only one who gives all people their bodies and life. He didn't just start the ball rolling with Adam and Eve when he formed Adam out of the dust of the ground and breathed the breath of life into him, and when he made Eve out of Adam's rib. He gives all people life and breath. In him all people live and move and have their being. In this passage, the Apostle Paul is speaking to philosophers in Athens, Greece. They love to debate things like the meaning of life. So Paul doesn't only tell them that God gives all people life, he also tells them the chief purpose of each person's life, that they might find the true God. Can you see why God's gift of life is precious? This is the time God gives a person to come to faith in Jesus. He gives us temporary life on earth so that we might find our eternal life in Him. We call the time of a person's life on earth, from the beginning to the end, a time of grace. It's the period of time that God graciously gives to a person to come to faith in Jesus. Once a person dies, that window closes. There are no second chances after death. Man is destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. How does a person come to faith in Jesus? That will be the subject of another lesson. For now, we'll just say that it happens by hearing the good news about Jesus. Faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ. God is the only one who can create life. He alone reserves the right to decide when it will end. Our lives and their length belong to God, not us. So you shall not murder. Some examples of murder are obvious. We hear about shootings and stabbings and other homicides almost on a daily basis, and everyone rightly calls such crimes murder. But there are other forms of murder that are defended and even promoted by segments of our society. Since the 1970s, abortion has been a legal form of murder in the United States. Abortion is the killing of a baby while it is still in its mother's womb. The Bible is clear that our lives begin as soon as we are conceived in our mother's womb. Promoters of abortion often deny that truth and say that a baby really isn't alive until later. Sometimes they admit that a baby is alive in its mother's womb, but that the mother's right to make a decision about her body is more important than the life of the baby. But God doesn't give a mother the right to end the life of her baby at any time. Another type of murder that is now defended and promoted in some countries, including some states in the United States, is called euthanasia, or assisted suicide. This is the killing or suicide of a person who is usually sick or in pain, or too old to enjoy life anymore or to contribute to society. Euthanasia is often carried out by administering poison to someone. People who promote this kind of murder often appeal to a person's right to die. But this isn't a right God gives to people. For some people, life can become excruciatingly miserable, and it can seem like they have no value anymore. But for people to decide to end their own life or anyone else's life is sinful. The fifth commandment calls for us to trust that God knows better than we do, and He is in the best position to decide when a life will end. He gives us life so that we may come to faith in Jesus and so that we can serve others. The fifth commandment prohibits more than the taking of life, but also the intentional hurting or harming of anyone. This includes any type of physical or emotional abuse, bullying, anything that we might do for the purpose of hurting someone's body or their emotions. Remember, the fifth commandment protects us, protects life. Social media through the internet has created so many more opportunities for bullying, and God forbids it. He even goes so far as forbidding the desire to hurt someone. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. Instead of hating and hurting, God requires that we help and befriend everyone who crosses our path, even people who hate us, in whatever way we can, in every bodily need. We should also add a word about whether or not the government has a right to kill. Think of the soldier or the policeman or the executioner. Part of their responsibilities is to end life when required for the sake of peace and order and safety of society. If they do that, are they breaking the Fifth Commandment? You may remember this passage from Romans 13 from the lesson on the Fourth Commandment. God says that the government is His representative to provide for our physical welfare. If we disobey or disrespect our government, we are rebelling against God, and He says those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. In verse 4, He elaborates on that judgment. If you do wrong, be afraid, for He does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. God gives the government the right as His representative to kill when required for the sake of justice, peace, and order in society. This is a great responsibility, and governments have often abused it. We don't have to think any further than Pontius Pilate giving the order for Jesus to be crucified. When a government abuses this right, then it is murder, and God will hold them accountable. So the Fifth Commandment protects God's gift of body and life. As the giver of life, God determines when it should end. Our lives belong to Him. He gives us life so that we may come to faith in Jesus, and then serve Jesus by serving others for however long and in whatever ways He allows us.